Juan Soto has been dealt, but Wilson Contreras has not. Tyler Mahle has been dealt. So has Frankie Montas. There's a whole lot more to talk about as we go through all the trade deadline deals here on RotoWire's Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I'm Jeff Erickson. He's Fred Zinkie. It is Tuesday night. We're doing a different time just so we could go after the trade deadline. A very busy day after a really slow week. The last 2 days, Fred, have lived up to expectation, I would have to say.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's funny, we had talked about doing this right at the deadline, like right at 6 p.m. Eastern. And then we decided to leave it for an extra hour. I'm very, very glad that we left it for an extra hour because so much. I think not that everything we are about to say will be right. In fact, a lot of it will be wrong in the end. But I think will probably have better takes on these trades than we would have at 6 p.m. Especially when trades like the Rizal Iglesias trade that we're going to talk about, the Whit Merrifield trade. Those trades are coming in like at 6 or after
or later. Yeah, Iglesias was like 6:10 almost.
Right.
And then, we saw a couple of tiny ones leak through. There's a lot of last minute deals, which is always the case, but it was good to see. It was really fun to see that. And of course, the lead option has to be the San Diego Padres. And what all that they did a lot. But it starts with Juan Soto. I was skeptical at first that a Soto deal would ever happen, especially in season. I think there was probably a 50-50 chance he wouldn't get dealt. I was wrong. I had heard all these rumors. Okay, the Padres are leading candidate, but so many times that's incorrect. So many times it's a case there where it's an issue there where that's a leading candidate because what the agents have fed. They're the leading candidates to get Max Scherzer last year, but it happened. It happened this morning too. Not in the deadline. And, not at noon. It happened, well, not noon my time, but noon your time. It did happen around noon your time. I was able to talk about it on Sirius XM today. It was a big, big deal there. What did you think about that trade?
I thought it was about what you figured they would get back for Soto. I know people had compared it to the Trey Turner and Max Scherzer trade. They had talked about the Miguel Cabrera trade, although comparing it to a trade like 15 years ago feels maybe a little foolish.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought maybe the Dodgers trade for Turner and Scherzer, because that added up, I believe, to 2.5 seasons. So, or something in that range. So I think that was maybe a better comparison. I thought it was fair value. I thought it was smart of them to get Josh Bell thrown in. He's not a throw-in, right?
No.
He's a good player.
Included.
That's right. To get him included, I have no idea how those conversations work. Did AJ Preller take it right down to the end and they had arranged a deal and he's like, oh, and I want Josh Bell, or was he in it the whole time? I don't know. But I think it was fair value for Soto. You're never going to get fair value for Soto. I think it was as fair as they were going to get. I'm not surprised that it was done like much earlier than the deadline. I think it's the kind of deal that's so big that you figure out a team that's really willing to do this. You figure out the players and you make the deal. Instead of nickel and diming the Padres and wanting them to throw in like, oh, we want one more mid-level prospect. No, we got the Dodgers on the phone. I think you can do that with some of these guys who were traded at the deadline for one or two prospects. When we're talking about a Juan Soto type deal, and then there were all the hiccups with Hosmer. So, I think that I think even with those hiccups too, I think they had to get it done early and then figure it out the rest of the day, and they did. And I think actually in our show notes, I still have Hosmer going to. I don't think I ever changed that. I didn't. So
yep.
I still have
it's
Hosmer.
Luke Voigt, not Hosmer.
It's Luke Voigt now, and Hosmer's a Red Sox. Yeah. So fantasy wise, I think this is a small increase in value for Soto and Bell. I mean, Soto is who he is. Bell is who he is. They're in a better lineup. They're in a team that's going for it. I think it's not a monumental change, but I think it's because the park change isn't much or anything, but I think it's a small change uptick in their value. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think it helps Luke Voigt a lot, although he's on a bad team. There'll be nobody there with him.
Yeah, he play every game down the stretch. Yep.
He'll play every game and hit in a better ballpark. Washington in the summertime is a great place to hit. Great place to hit when it's hot. And
He's
humid.
he's probably their cleanup hitter every game from here on out.
Luis Garcia batting in front of him, and ... Yeah, Nelson Cruz, Victor Robles.
Yeah, how about Nelson Cruz didn't get traded?
Who's going to trade for him? Have you looked at what he's done this year?
For sure. You're right. I thought maybe some team. You're right. So that must mean that they couldn't even give him away.
Like no, not really.
That no team was willing to trade like their 30th best prospect just to have Nelson Cruz kind of rotate in and into their DH and pinch hit down the stretch.
Yeah.
I think that means he's done. This is it for him.
I would think so. I mean, there's a date for everyone. I thought he'd bounce back after last year. I was wrong. I rostered him a couple of places.
Yeah.
But yeah, and keep in mind you're getting 0 defense from Cruz. So there's that. He's been slumping lately. 661 OPS this year.
Doesn't even have 10 homers. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. It's been a rough year, and I'm sure the team context doesn't help, but he chose to stay there too. But now looking at what they got, so they got James Anderson's number 5 prospect and Robert Hassel. We got his number 11 prospect in James Wood. They got the number 205 prospect in Harlan Susana. They got 2 guys that would be top 100, if not top 20 prospects in CJ Abrams and Mackenzie Gore had they not already graduated. Maybe top 50. I might be overstating the case. Point is, they got a really significant haul here. They needed to. Their farm system was really badly barren. It was not a good farm system. Their top 3 players in their farm system were all added in the last 2 weeks. Elijah Green being number 3, being a guy that got drafted in the first round this year. Brady House was a first-round draft pick last year, and he's kind of fallen backward a little bit. Cade Cavalli had a slow start to the season, and they've had a lot of other prospects fail. You look at Carter Keybust as one of those guys that didn't develop pitching-wise. They just haven't gotten much from their young pitchers. Josiah Gray looks good. And Keibert Ruiz, who I like his long-term future too. He's had mixed returns this year, but I think that's still it's okay of a return. But the whole thing is they didn't have to make a trade right now. That's the one thing. I think they could get more for him now than in the offseason. They might be right about that. I'm not sure. But at the same time, they didn't. They did this very public negotiation with Soto. They said, well, we offer you got Buster Olney out there parroting what they say, like the highest contract ever. No, not an average value. I mean, it's a 13-year deal that they're offering. It was like 20th highest in baseball in average annual value. And he's a Scott Boras client. Average annual value matters to him. But it's kind of disingenuous to say that. Like, oh, we did our best. Sorry, we had to trade him. Our hands were. They're selling the franchise. The Lerners are. And that was a big issue for them. It's either get them signed or under market signed, by the way, or clear the books. And that they chose the clear the books method.
Yeah, I think this is what they had. I think this might be almost what they had to do. You mentioned a lot of their failures. They also didn't expect Steven Strasburg to be a complete zero at this point in his career. Patrick Corbin signing hasn't turned out at all. And that's a big contract. So, and just a big spot on their team. This is what they have to do. They had to add several prospects. They have to tear it all down, which they've done. They have to let these guys slowly emerge as major leaguers over the next 2 or 3 years, and then they can start signing free agents to, veteran free agents to go along.
I don't know if they had to do this. That's what I'm arguing is they didn't have to do this. At least they didn't have to do it now. They let Rendon walk. Now, granted, Rendon's been hurt.
Do you think Soto was just unwilling, though, to tie himself to a team that's in last place and has a terrible farm system?
Like
no matter what the number.
No, because they entered negotiations in the first place. There was back and forth. Right. It's just they didn't match what he perceives to be the market rate. On an annual basis, it was like $29 million, which yes, is amazing and a lot of money, but it's also less than many other players in baseball. And you're never getting another contract again. This is his it's it. If you sign a 13-year deal, it's done. No matter what happens the rest of the market, no matter if players are making $50 million 5 years from now. He is an inner circle player. He's a generational player. He's 23 years old. I think, I think if you give him the right deal, he stays. but that obviously that didn't come close. I mean, it was rejected pretty quickly. And yes, the Nats may have had an expectation he would have signed it. Maybe they would have given him a little bit of a original team discount, but I think the definition of that was starkly different between the two parties, and that happens. But that's business. That's baseball. I get it. It just it's the total package makes it sound so outrageous that he turned it down, but context matters, and I just don't think the context was right. But this might have been the time to sell if this is what you could get the biggest draw. And the Padres really are going for it. They had the combination of a desire to win now, win this year, and win the next 2 years too. It's not just this year. And the prospects to deal. There's other franchises that, sure, they're just as desperate to win, but they don't have the prospects to trade.
Yep, absolutely. The Padres are in a perfect position, and they should go for it. And they're getting Tatis back, and a lineup with Tatis, Machado, and Soto hitting in some order 2, 3, 4 probably, or 1, 2, 3.
And Bell hitting fifth in that lineup is so pretty darn good too.
Or like they could put Tatis in the leadoff spot. I think that would make a lot of sense. Soto second, Machado third. Like Soto's such an on-base machine. Making him second makes a lot of sense to me. Machado third, and then maybe Bell hits cleanup. The bottom half of that lineup is fine. It's not anything to write home about. It's fine. But it's the top.
It went from being one of the first 2 spots in the order to 7 and 8 or 8 and 9 now, though. Too.
Yeah,
Grisham gets all the way down to batting last
for sure.
And that's just fine. Alfaro's actually a better than average offensive catcher this year. So that's been, he's been a nice add for this team. But he just had another hit to make him go up 11-5 in the first game of the doubleheader. They're playing some inspired ball after this trade, and it wasn't just that. It doesn't end there. It's also adding Brandon Drury. It's also adding Josh Hader. I mean, this is a big day in Padres history. Big 48 hours in Padres history. What did you think about the Hader for Rogers and not just change, but Rogers plus? I think it's a better way of phrasing it. It wasn't pocket change they got there. What did you think about that deal?
Well, I think it's another go for it deal by the Padres, and it's another spread out our time in contention for the Brewers, which I think fits Milwaukee and fits the Brewers. Like the Brewers, I think are not all in this season. They're hoping to make the playoffs. They'll see what kind of noise they can make when they get there. They would be a tough team to play in the playoffs with Woodruff and Burns in a short series. But the Brewers, like you can see by the lack of other moves they made at the deadline, they're not all in. And now they've traded Hader, who wouldn't have been on the team for as long, for Rogers, who will be on the team for longer, I believe, because of his contract. And then they've also added Ruiz, who might be their center fielder. Who knows? No, he's not right now, but he might be at some point this year.
Right.
Prospects. So I think it's just 2 teams, both who could be in the postseason, but with maybe different sense of urgency.
That's right. That's right. And I'll say this. It's really hard to find a good center fielder. They just had Lorenzo Cain retire this year. I mean, they've been using like Tyrone Taylor out there. They've been using Davis out there. Both options are kind of found lacking. Ruiz could be that guy if he can hit enough. I think the defense is there. The speed's there. Fantasy-wise, we want to see him get the call, but he may be in AAA for a while. But they got some other parts there that are pretty good too. The thing that caught my eye was, I think you look at Dinelson Lamet, and that's a guy that's really interesting to me.
That's right. So the Brewers took all these pieces that are interesting, I think, and then said, okay, the Brewers have done a good job with their pitchers, right? So they've said, I even forgot that Freddie Peralta's back. Like that's a danger.
Yep, that comes back this week. Yep.
Yeah, for the postseason. So tomorrow, yeah. So I think they've said we'll take all these pieces. I mean, let's be serious. Rogers was a top flight fantasy closer a month ago. So I mean, and he had been a good reliever for the Twins for a long time. So I mean, this is someone who had fallen on hard times, but he's a lefty. They can put Devin Williams in as the closer. Williams could be like super valuable in fantasy down the stretch. Rogers could be part of a setup man committee. He could get the odd save when it makes sense for a lefty to be there in the 9th inning instead of the 8th. I think the Brewers are that kind of forward-thinking organization to do all that. Like you said, Ruiz may not give us everything we want this season, but by next season, he could be their starting center fielder. He's been good at getting on base in the minors, so maybe he hits high in the lineup. Like I think all of that I think all that for the Brewers, I think it all makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's probably value, I'd say just horizontal for Hader for fantasy for the rest of the season. He was
Sure.
already great. Um, value,
In fact, the two
yes,
most saves in baseball, these two pitchers, right? Rogers
yeah,
and Hader. I think so.
that's right. So, and then, so I'd say value obviously way down for Rogers, way up for Devin Williams. I wouldn't say it's a lock. Devin Williams gets all their saves down the stretch, but I think he'll lead the team in saves the rest of the way handily. Do you
So
agree?
I don't think it's way down for Rogers because I think it was already down. He had
I
already
guess so.
lost the job. He had already been, say they're using a committee without him. Luis Garcia picked up saves on Sunday and Monday after the trade, but Sunday, and leading to a bunch of people picking up Luis Garcia, who I didn't know until Sunday throws 101 miles an hour.
Impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, he that, all those fab bids for Garcia, it's just like, I mean, at least you got one save out of it minimum, and maybe
If you put him in
another
your
one in this
lineup.
doubleheader today.
Yes. Some people may not have put him in their lineup. They may have bid on him that
This guy.
saw the Hader trade.
This guy,
Right.
yeah.
And you got no saves because you didn't even get the one save.
So I spent the fab and didn't get the fun to go with it there.
When I say it's value way down for Rogers, the reason I feel that way is I felt like there was an opportunity for him to have maybe like a few clean innings and then get that Padres closer job back from Garcia. Whereas in Milwaukee, I just don't think it's going to happen.
See, I disagree. I think they like using Williams in the 7th and 8th inning a lot.
I guess.
I don't know if they're going to necessarily go to Williams right away. They could go Rogers some if a situation calls for a lefty. They could go with Boxberger. I think that Craig Counsell is really good at manipulating that bullpen too. So I wouldn't be surprised if he gets some here. The problem is you're not going to be able to count on it. You're just going to have to hope. I mean, you don't start him this week if you have the flexibility to change your roster beforehand. You probably don't because Padres played the game on Monday, but I wouldn't be surprised if Rogers is still in the mix.
So you wouldn't drop Rogers, even
I would not.
Even
I would not.
Okay, I think I would drop him in at 12. I'm not that optimistic. And Williams,
Okay.
not much to say on Williams because he's basically not available. So a bunch of people had a great setup man on the bench and on their roster and may now have a great closer, and we'll see.
Yeah,
He's
that's right.
way more valuable than he was, but there's not much actionable unless you're in a trading league, I guess. Other than that, and your deadline hasn't passed, but
right.
in FAAB leagues, there's not much actionable you can do on Williams.
Yeah, there's other places where you can. Yeah, you could. And in safe plus hold leagues, Boxberger's definitely going to gain a little bit of value because he moves up one rung in the ladder probably, or at least he's at even with Rogers, I would say.
Right.
So yeah, I think you're right about that. So yeah, that was a fun little trade. I mean, the Brewers, they behaved. This is like you said, this is how they extend the window for themselves without really hurting themselves too much in the short term, which, it's a first place team. You know who else always trades their closer? Was Billy Beane. Billy Beane did the same thing all the time, and it worked famously. I remember Billy Taylor getting dealt, and they get their future closer out of it. They trade, they traded for and away with Keith Folk. They did the same, I think, with Isringhausen. This is what they did, and they found that to be like a way to add value to the team. So it wouldn't surprise me if this is just something that they do in the Brewers just kind of found too. And let's face it, the market for relievers wasn't that great, except the Twins going out and getting Jorge Lopez. Let's talk Twins next because you and I just said it before the podcast started. The Twins had a great trade deadline, really great trade deadline. They didn't get the biggest names, but they got targeted acquisitions. They got Tyler Mahle, who I think is going to do really well in Minnesota. They got Jorge Lopez, and they got Michael Fulmer too to add to their setup package because they needed another starter and they needed to fortify that bullpen. And I think they did that really well. And their competition, the White Sox and the Guardians, did virtually nothing.
That's right. Yeah, it seems like for the Twins, full speed ahead to try to make the postseason. Yeah, the White Sox were the favorites to make the postseason out of that division at the start of the year, so they could certainly, Luis Roberts coming back, like they could certainly still, like some other guys like Lucas Giolito, we know have the talent to turn things around. It could still happen, but the Twins have set themselves up really well. I think Tyler Mahle will be much more effective as a member of the Twins than he was with the Reds. His is so obvious. The home road splits this year, throughout his career, it's easily traceable. It's home run prevention. He should be much better as a member of the Twins. Like if you have Mahle, yeah, you're dancing about this one. You're loving it. The bullpen is interesting, and I think that's something fantasy managers are going to care a lot about right now. Like, does Lopez become their closer? Do they just kind of committee it with Lopez and Pagan and Duran, and now Fulmer is in there? To just the four of those guys kind of like share saves and, you know, share like the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning, depending on who's fresh and matchups and things like that? Or, you know, I don't know. What do you think about that?
I trying to recall. I think Rocco Baldelli had a quote saying he was going to pitch him in the 9th inning. Let me see if I can find that quote. It was one of those, I'm not going to use the word closer quotes,
Sure.
But I think it was, I do think he kind of acknowledged that there's going to be a lot of 9th inning usage out of him.
And I mean, while you're looking, I can mention, you know, Lopez, like, he's been great this year and a good closer. Prior to this year, he was terrible and was not a closer. So this isn't like they traded for like Craig Kimbrell or Raisel Iglesias or one of these guys who has several years of being a closer. Like, it's not like Lopez is the guy who has to be a closer. He's just a guy who Baltimore made their closer this year, and he had done well with it. He should be fine at doing it with the Twins. But they could easily just say, we're going to share saves and give some of these other guys opportunities. But I would say, did you find the quote? Because before I hear the quote, I would say I would keep Lopez in every league. I would not add Fulmer. I would be pretty willing to cut Pagan at this point.
Oh, yeah. Pagan's let's go last first. Pagan's an easy cut because he's not even the first one.
Yeah.
The guy. Duran's a guy I hold if it's not Lopez.
Yeah, I would keep Duran. Keep Lopez for now.
Yeah.
Cut the others too.
I'm still scrolling on the quote. I'm looking at Brandon Warren's timeline because he's my go-to for all things Philly. But the problem is he's got like 1,000 tweets today, like almost every beat writer. But the Twins were very active, so it's very difficult. But I'll find it at some point here. But I believe that the line was Lopez will pitch in the 9th inning. You know, the thing is, I think Lopez changed himself significantly, that there's some sustainability there. But if I'm the Orioles, I still think it was smart of them to do it. I think this was kind of one of those win-win trades. You know, I think that's one of those where you look at what the Orioles are at right now, like I think the line was like a 2% chance at the 3rd wild card. That's not a contender. You know, that's a team that's having a feel good story, but you do your best to still win in the future. I know there's value in making the playoffs, but I think they traded Lopez at his peak at the same time.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think as much as we just gave the Twins a lot of credit, when I look at their roster, I do see a team that I think is an easy out in the playoffs compared to other playoffs.
Like every other year.
Yeah. Unfortunately, so when I look at their rotation in a 3-game series in the first round, Sonny Gray, Tyler Mahle, and Joe Ryan, like, it's fine, but it's not, compared to what some other teams will roll out, it's not great. It's fine. Their batting order, again, it's fine. Like, Carlos Correa is their best hitter. He's good. He's not Aaron Judge. Like, the other guys, Polanco, Reyes, Buxton, like, they're fine. The bottom of the order is nothing special. It's got guys like Gary Sanchez and Gio Urshela. It's not a good lineup for a playoff team. To me, they look like a team that can make the playoffs, but unless they get lucky, is an easy out. But that bullpen will obviously try to be part of the solution. And I think just making the playoffs for the Twins and winning their division would be a really successful season. And, you know, even if the Twins played the Rays in the first round, I don't know. Right now, I would take the Rays.
Yeah.
We'll see.
But I think they win at least one game. At least it's no longer a one and done for them. They've got that going for them. After
and you never know.
Incredible streak.
Yeah, there's so much of a luck factor, and the Twins will have all 3 games at home, as long as I understand the new baseball playoff rules properly.
Right.
The Twins will play all 3 games at home. I'm still not picking them to win the series, I think, unless the other team's got some injuries. But whatever, they're going for winning their division. And they picked up Mahle, who's right? Am I right? I believe he's under contract for next year as well.
Yes, he is.
Right? That's his free agent. Next year's his year. So next year they could trade him again if they're not in contention and get some of what they gave up for him back. Or they could have him for another postseason. So
I could not find the quote, by the way.
That's okay.
I suck at multitasking.
I think I'm with you that. So what I found really interesting about this is we talked leading into the deadline. A lot of people talked about all these closers on losing teams who could see all their fantasy value sapped at the deadline. Well, a bunch of them weren't traded, so that's great. David Bednar, Scott Barlow, etc.
There were plenty that were, though.
Lopez got traded, but this is what I was going to say. Lopez got traded into one of the few situations where he could actually go to a new team
Right.
and still get saves. And then David Robertson, who we can talk about later, he got traded to a team where he could go and could.
Yeah, that's 50-50, though.
Yeah,
I mean,
but could get saves. None of these guys got traded to a team where, it's just a clear setup.
Right? But you're wrong, because there is one.
Except for one. That's right.
Yes.
That's where I was going with this whole thing. Except for one guy who none of us really talked about and no one really saw coming. That was it just shows how much planning just doesn't always work out. And we stashed Scott Efris in case he was the Cubs closer, and he got traded. And
that's not the one I'm referring to.
No, I know. And people were selling low on some of these other guys. And I'll drum roll you. And drum roll, please. The closer who just lost his job is.
You can answer it.
Raisel Iglesias.
Yes, of course.
Who no one saw coming, and is way higher end as far as like what was invested in him. Is way higher end than all the guys we were
just
talking
signed
about.
a 4-year deal in the offseason. It's crazy. No one sees the Iglesias coming. This is now the second time where it's been a little bit of a surprise deal there. When he was traded away from the Reds 2 years ago, it was a surprise deal too. Unpleasant surprise. Now, here's the key on this deal here. Iglesias signed this 4-year deal. The incumbent closer is Kenley Jansen, who signed a 1-year deal. Kenley Jansen closes this year, but Iglesias closes the next 3.
Right. So I think that's an easy conversation with Iglesias. We know Iglesias will want to be the closer. They bring him in and say, hey, we need to work we need to work the 8th inning for the rest of the season.
Right.
Kenley's going to be the closer. You're a closer next year, 100% guarantee. We're not going to sign a closer in the offseason. You're a guy. You're getting paid like the guy. You don't have to worry about that part of it. And we'll throw you a save chance once in a while.
That's right, because Kenley doesn't go back to backs very often.
That's right, and you're clearly capable of handling it. So, and it covers the Braves. I thought it was interesting when the Braves traded Will Smith but then this all made more sense once they got Iglesias. This kind of covers the Braves in case Jansen has any more heart issues, which is not something I think that can be predicted, like an arm injury or something like that. So it just kind of covers them a little bit that way. But yeah, I think Iglesias is a tough one. Like, I guess you have to keep him for now. There will be some fantasy teams where he will not be worth keeping, I think, in a couple weeks.
I think in 12s, it's a really hard call.
Yeah.
And 10s, even harder. Still, 15s, I think he's a keep. And I think it's not that difficult of a decision. We'll see how the Braves use him, but I think the Braves are a good team. They're going to provide many chances. So there'll be times when Kenley's not available. It does hurt, like the secondary guys in that Braves bullpen. The guys that
AJ Minter,
Colin McHugh, although McHugh was never really closing.
He's not really in that late inning picture. He's just there for the ratios. But you're right. Every 15-team league team probably has just a really good setup man on their roster, and he's that guy now, even though it's disappointing. If I gave you an over/under of 4.5 saves the rest of the year for Kenley Jansen, what would you take?
You mean for Iglesias?
Or for Iglesias, sorry, my bad. What would you take?
I would go over.
Okay.
I'd probably personally set the line at like 7. I mean, it's too. You think about it, there's about 7-8 weeks left in the season. About once a week is what I'm thinking is what he averages. And
once a week is what he's been averaging on the Angels, so that wouldn't actually take away any value.
It'd probably even less the way the Angels have played lately.
He has 16, so far this year. So
yeah, and he was probably like the 4th closer taken in a lot of drafts.
Yep,
third to 5th, maybe in that range.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd say 3rd in many drafts. But yeah, it's huge disappointment because of the Angels. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when the Angels were a game ahead of the Astros in like early May, and there were articles about the Astros finally have some competition, and it made sense, Fred. I mean,
the Angels were finally going to cash in on Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani, right, and actually go to the playoffs with them together. That would have been amazing.
Yep.
Who's the Angels' new closer before we leave this one?
So I think it's either Ryan Tepera or it might be Jesse Chavez, who got traded yet again. Who I think he's like the most traded player in baseball now. I think I saw something on that. I don't know the exact stat. It might have been hyperbole, but he's been traded a lot. He's having a good enough year.
Yep.
He could do it. He could do it. I mean, the question is, does it matter?
No, I actually think they're going to go with a really gross closer committee that serves to give us basically no value. That's kind of I did. So how about this? In Yahoo Friends and Family, I didn't even go out to check if Ryan Tepera was available. And I thought of it and I didn't feel strongly enough. So I grabbed Felix Bautista a few days ago. I'm not cutting him for Ryan Tepera. And then yesterday, and we can get to this one maybe in a minute, but yesterday I grabbed Michael Givens.
Oops.
Yeah. And so anyway,
he got traded to the Mets late.
Right.
I don't even know if you noticed that one.
I didn't notice that. So I'll be dropping him, but I don't even know if I'm going to drop him for Tepera.
Yeah. You know who
Tepera's available.
So I did go pick up Rowan Wick from the Cubs.
Okay.
And I dropped Matt Moore for him. So it might be a lateral move but I just figured, Moore got that one save. I'm surprised the Rangers weren't more active in selling off like some of their secondary parts, Martin Perez, some of the relievers. I get it. Yep. They have some big names that they signed in the offseason. So maybe wanted to have some continuity and build towards next year. But they had news. John Gray's out 4 to 6 weeks now with an oblique strain. He got hurt yesterday. While we're talking about injuries, Byron Buxton is getting checked out again in his knee. He was out of the lineup today when we were talking Twins. That might be the most significant Twins news of the day. All our gushing over what they did on the trade deadline might not matter if Buxton can't play.
Yeah, it's not a bigger loss maybe than the cumulative additions to the pitching staff, but yeah, that would be a huge deal.
Certainly in the playoffs it is.
Yeah, for sure. So, and jumping back to that, like we were just talking about the Cubs closer situation and the Angels closer situation, like we may have in fantasy fewer closer situations to draw from down the stretch, which is going to be really frustrating for teams that are trying to catch up in saves. It's
been hard all year too.
I'm not really seeing a deadline deal that has opened up unless maybe we're talking about the Orioles and Felix Bautista. I'm not I grabbed him, but I'm not totally convinced that they give a rookie the full closer's job down the stretch. They might, but I don't think it's anything close to a lock.
I think if it's on merit, they will, but they might do something where it's, we want to have them in high leverage situations. They may choose to do that. But nonetheless, I think that was a very good pickup by you. Savvy pickup by you, Fred.
Well, this is my thing in Friends and Family. I'm never the first guy to the waiver wire, so I have to beat the waiver wire.
It's an obvious pickup, though, too. I don't know what I was thinking, not looking for him. I've been stashing guys like that all year. I picked up Ryan Helsley earlier. That's worked out. I picked up Sir Anthony Dominguez. I picked up Robertson or drafted Robertson. I picked up Pete Fairbanks. I'm streaming these guys, I'm just, and it gets some here and there, but it's been hard to find saves. If you didn't get Clay Holmes, if you didn't get Ryan Helsley, there haven't been too many saves pickups this year.
And if you saved your FAAB last Sunday in a mixed league thinking, I really need a closer, I got to save my FAAB by next Sunday, I'm going to go for a closer. I don't know. Maybe someone will emerge. The rest of
maybe Bautista's available. That's the one. That's like the one screamingly obvious.
Or maybe someone does get 2 saves for the Cubs
or the Angels.
Or the Angels. That's right. Maybe they Tepera gets 2 saves, and you're like, there we go. I'm putting triple digits on Tepera. He's going to have to be my savior.
Yeah.
But there, I guarantee you, there are people out there who are like, oh, if I get 5 more saves, I just found one more guy, I could catch 5 teams in my standing or my saves category, and I got to save my FAAB money in case someone emerges. I'm not going to bid on Luis Garcia. I'm going to, save my money for someone from the deadline. Not too much came from the deadline.
That's true.
And like I said, we were briefly talking about, you think Robertson is about 50-50 with the Phillies. I'm going to give him better odds than Dominguez. I'm not going to say he's like 100, but I'm going to go like 70-30 or something like that.
Are we cutting Knable and Mr. Hand?
Yeah. I am. Yeah, I would for sure. I think Knable's now way down the list. Like, I think Dominguez is good enough to just be their closer down the stretch. Yeah. That's what they want. I just think Robertson maybe a little more saves experience, an older pitcher. I don't know. Maybe he gets the closer's role, and Dominguez is probably still their best reliever. Like, maybe they start using him in more of a variety of roles. I don't know. They could easily just stick with Dominguez and pitch Robertson in other roles. But like I said, I'm going to handicap it a little bit to Robertson.
Fair enough. I hope you're right. Because even though I have Dominguez and Friends and Family, I have Robertson in a lot of places. Labor, one of my main event teams. I'm really kind of counting on that one there. David Bednar did not get traded. I'm surprised at that, but his form was a little lacking recently, so that might have had something to do with it, and the Pirates might not have seen what they liked. And the thing is, it's not like he's a free agent this year. Bednar's going to be around for a while, so they didn't have to trade him, so that makes sense. And the other big shocker is Daniel Barr getting signed to a contract extension, 2 years, $19 million yesterday. Yep. What are the Rockies doing, Fred? No trades at all. Not a single trade. LOL Rockies again.
I saw the Rockies listed as the biggest loser for the trade deadline.
Oh, you saw me do that?
Yeah.
Or is that somebody else's list?
No, I think I saw.
More reputable source.
Nah, come on, more reputable. No one's more reputable. No, I saw that one. I might have been. I saw a lot of people just mentioning like, what are the Rockies doing? But that's
so fun to dunk on the Rockies.
That's how we always are with the Rockies. Like, and we're not just dunking on them. Like, we are actually looking at them and saying, like, what are you guys doing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
all the time.
Yeah,
it's first guesses, second guesses.
It's actually amazing.
Guesses.
They're not even worse.
We're always right about them. They're always doing the wrong thing consistently. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, all the way back Ian Desmond signings and things like that. And you're just, what are you guys thinking?
Yes,
like I said, it's amazing.
That's
it's amazing. They're not even worse than they are. So,
yeah, it is.
Anyways, the other team I saw people dunking on was the Cubs. For not trading Wilson Contreras or Ian Happ, but especially Contreras.
Yeah, exactly. SB says Rocky should have gotten Joey Gallo for pennies and rejuvenate his career. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just it makes so much sense. Just get him the heck out of New York. It didn't work there. They could have gotten him super cheap. I mean, super cheap in terms of talent, but they're probably thinking they want to be super cheap in terms of dollars, knowing them because they're the Rockies. And, Dick Monfort, I mean, I think it starts at the ownership level. That's where the rot begins. So many times we dunk on the GMs, but if the owner's saying, no, I mean, I think that's what happened with the White Sox too, and Rick Hahn versus Jerry Reinsdorf. So we'll see about that, but we'll get to that in a sec. And we're going to get to the Cubbies in a second. But before we do the Cubbies and the lack of Wilson Contreras trade, we got a quick note from one of our sponsors. The weather is heating up, and so are the promotions at Caesars Sportsbook. Today, anyone who is at least 21 years or older, so that includes you, Fred, and in a licensed Caesars Sportsbook state, okay, that's not you, can create a new account and redeem the Caesars Sportsbook promo code ROTO15. That's ROT as in Tom, 015. The promo code gives new users a risk-free first bet up to $1,500. Visit Caesars.com/sportsbooks or download the Caesars Sportsbook app today. And don't forget to use promo code ROTO15 when signing up. All right, so the Cubs did not trade Wilson Contreras. They had this long, warm hug at Wrigley Field, touching moment, going away game, and before they started this road trip, he was as good as gone. Everybody knew it. The Cubs kind of went along with it there. I'm looking forward to reading all the pieces about why they missed, why they didn't do a trade.
Yeah. So does this mean they're open to trying to sign him and keep him long term? I don't know. That would make sense then if they did that before he ever got to free agency. But to me that was really surprising because if they traded him, they would get something for him and they could sign him, right? Mm-hmm. Like I don't know. Strategically, that to me would make the most sense. Even if they are interested in signing him, let him hit the open market and then sign him.
I talked about this on VSiN a little bit earlier here. I think they were looking, they're going to get free agent compensation if he signs elsewhere or they re-sign him. They're going to get that first round draft pick at the end of the first round. I think it is. Their whole idea has to be, we need something that's going to be better than that. And they must have been thinking that, for a 2-month rental, they weren't getting better than that. But I would recounter that I would, I don't know what the offers were, first of all. I think we never will know exactly what the offers are. But you got to think that they could have gotten some reputable prospect that could have, that you at least can play a little bit in professional ball. There is a big leap between pick 32 and a guy that's doing well at AA. A big leap. There's no guarantee of success. So I'm a little surprised at that. As I said before, it's not like they stopped any of the chatter, any of the talk about him being on the trade market. They really anticipated moving him. They dealt away their entire bullpen. So clearly they anticipated being, sellers at the deadline here. They haven't acted like buyers in a while. I mean, except for the Seiya Suzuki signing, which, which is a little disconnect between everything else they've done. Yeah, I'm surprised he didn't get dealt. I'm surprised the Guardians didn't go after him. I think once the Astros traded for Vasquez, and we'll talk about that in a second, that kind of just screwed the market a little bit there for for Wilson Contreras and for the Cubs.
I thought the Yankees would have been a fit. Like the Yankees are pretty all in this year, right? Jose Trevino's been okay, but I mean, come on, you can replace
2 homers yesterday. 2 homers.
Saved his job. Maybe saved his
The
job.
Mets, maybe Joe McHugh got talked about him. I've seen a lot of people dunking on the Mets. We'll get to that too. Because I have some comments on the Mets. But yeah, I'm surprised. I'm really surprised.
Yeah. Anyways, I don't know. Like you said,
the Rays,
we don't know what the answer. We don't know what the offers were. So,
yep.
I guess, but in theory, it seems very foolish.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, talking about inaction, let's stick in Chicago. The White Sox. Oh my goodness, Fred. They sat on their hands. They added Jake Diekman. That's it. That's the list. So, they made it very public that they were in on Ohtani as if Ohtani was available. I mean, it was pretty clear it was like only if there's like a shoot for the moon sort of deal, like the Soto trade, which there clearly wasn't. And then, well, we did our best. We tried. They didn't do anything, which it's stunning to me. It's been a disappointing season for the White Sox for clear. And I know they've been hurt a lot, but they've also underperformed. I think they've done, I also think they sat on their hands in the offseason. Their only acquisition in the offseason was Kendall Graveman. They really haven't done anything. And the Twins were active, but the White Sox and the Guardians were just like, nope, we refuse to do anything.
Yeah, and the White Sox are 3 games out of the division. And when I look at their lineup and their rotation and their bullpen, it seems to be about as good as Minnesota's. I don't see why they felt like they couldn't add anything. And it has some like pretty obvious and maybe easy to fill holes. Like they could get an outfielder to replace Gavin Sheets in their lineup. Josh Harrison's in their lineup. Like like you said, they could have added more than Jake Diekman to a bullpen that like has maybe underachieved a little bit, but has some decent pieces in it. The rotation though, like Cueto's been fine for them. I think you just have to count on Giolito and Lance Lynn to pitch better.
Well, that's just the thing. Lance Lynn is showing some signs. Giolito has been terrible at home, just awful at home. I tweeted right before the show. I actually used Giolito in the Tout Wars DraftKings thing tonight, but man, I had a lot of hesitation. I almost didn't pull the trigger. He's at 6,800 when the top starting pitchers are going for 10,000 in a home start against the Royals. And I still had hesitations about it, palpitations almost. Mm-hmm. But it's really remarkable how bad he's been this year.
Yeah, I absolutely. He like they have no choice but to just keep running him out there and hope that he figures it out. We just did a Tout Wars, the Tout table, and we said, what was it? Was it Lance Lynn? No, it was Giolito, Barrios, and Trevor Rogers. Which player is the pitcher is the most likely to turn things around? And at least at the time I put my entry in, I felt like most people were picking Giolito. Yeah. I picked Barrios and commented that I think he already has turned it around. In like his last 6 starts, his ERA is like below 3.5. Like I think he's already turned it around. I'm not saying he's going to be an ace down the stretch, but I think he's already come back to being mostly what you expected of him. Giolito hasn't turned it around at all.
This is what he does, though. He's reeling you in, Fred. And
the 2-inning 7-run start is coming.
Just look at for him. To me, it's all about schedule. He's a classic bully.
Yeah.
It's Detroit, St. Louis, Kansas City, 13 strikeouts against the Phillies. Wow, that's impressive. Oakland, Tampa Bay. Those are his last 6 starts. So Philly without Bryce Harper is the only one that even remotely scares me at all.
St. Louis St. Louis actually didn't have Goldschmidt and Arenado.
Right, exactly.
So that doesn't scare you. Yeah. Yep, for sure. But winning the winnable starts is a big part of being a good pitcher. But you're right.
You just got to know that it's coming.
Yeah. And I've said this on this podcast before this year, and I do feel like as someone who watches most of his starts that I can tell in the first inning whether he's got it or not. At the end of the first inning, he struck with the Tigers. I believe he struck out the side in the first inning in his last start. Some other starts, it's just right from the first inning, it's just hard contact. And you're like, oh, it doesn't happen.
Right? Like you said this before. You know right away what you're getting.
It seems like that. And you go back and look at, he's just had some really bad starts this year. I don't know. But anyways, as far as guys who have turned, if Lucas Giolito against soft competition could do what Barrios has done his last 6 starts, I'm sure White Sox fans would be ecstatic with where things are at right now. So like I said, I think he's turned it around a bit. Like, I don't know if he's turned around to being like a just set and forget starter again. But anyways, back to the White Sox. You're right. There could have easily added an outfielder, an infielder, lengthened their lineup. They didn't. they decided, I guess, that they're just going to cross their fingers on this season.
Yeah. The other team is the Guardians, and a series of posts in the forum, I think, that are pretty good about this here. A series of 3 posts. The only GMs I don't question are Tampa Bay and Cleveland. The front offices always seem to be a step ahead. They do Moneyball better than the A's ever have. Following that, the Guardians asked about Sean Murphy. A's said they aren't moving him to the offseason. Cleveland doesn't trade top prospects for 2-month rentals, so they didn't even ask about Contreras. They also didn't do anything in the offseason. They have a young team. They're tied for first. Okay, so they're tied for first in the AL Central, a very weak division, in my opinion. That if you're looking at it as, okay, they're going to make the playoffs, I just don't think this is a team that can win the playoffs at all. And I think that's always got to ultimately be your goal. I think that Cleveland's been there before too, and they opted not to. I mean, when it goes back to Lindor, it goes back to even before that, they refused to kind of make those moves that put them over the top. And maybe I'm misremembering history here a little bit, and that's not always true. But these recent teams, and I don't think this is at the GM level. I think it goes all the way up to ownership again. I think this is a Dealine thing that they don't want to pay that extra amount. They claim to be losing money, and even before the pandemic, they were claiming that they weren't making enough money or something like that. I don't know. I think they've had some very good teams and some great rotations, and haven't been willing to do that extra step. And in fact, when push comes to shove, they shove guys out the door. They shove, Clevenger out the door. Now there are other things involved with Clevenger. I get that, but yeah.
I think Cleveland is probably doing about maybe even a little better than they expected to this year. I think sometimes expectation has a bit to do with it. Like maybe Cleveland, like, holy smokes, we're only a game out in the division or whatever, tied for first in the division. Like we're right there, but like we don't see ourselves as World Series contenders, so we're not going to sell, prospects at the deadline. We're happy to just kind of putter along in the AL Central and stay in the race and see how it goes. And I do know that, and me being a Blue Jays fan, that when Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins came from Cleveland to Toronto, like Cleveland's not a high budget team. And that was one of their comments at the introductory press conference, that they did find it appealing that they would get a higher payroll cap to work with in Toronto. And not that Toronto's at the very top of payroll, but that they would be higher than what they had to work with in Cleveland. And they
absolutely. Well, look at Andrew Friedman in LA too. Same thing.
So, I mean, that was something they mentioned. So
Time Bloom in Boston.
So Cleveland has to build something sustainable and not cheap, but sustainable and manageable at their payroll. And I guess trading prospects on this team that's just barely over 500, trading prospects for rentals doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah,
I definitely agree with that. Let's talk about your Blue Jays. They were in a really tough position. Like Tyler Mahle, he probably wasn't available because he was an anti-vaxxer. It's hard to get that elite starting pitcher. They ended up pulling a couple of late trades. Mitchell White from the Dodgers, who I kind of like, although he does have issues, as you mentioned in our chat when we were chatting. He does have issues going deep into games. He's Ross Stripling 2.0, perhaps. Another former Dodger. But I actually think Mitch White has some decent long-term upside. And then they surprised people with the Whit Merrifield trade. They also did a weird trade, too, where they traded for Anthony Bass and Zach Pop, trading away a guy who I thought was a pretty good prospect at one point in time, Jordan Groshans. What did you think about the totality of the Jays' moves?
Okay, so the Groshans trade, for sure, is underwhelming. Groshans, I think the answer to that is that Groshans has lost a lot of prospect value. He hasn't played well this year, and I think you'll see him fall on prospect lists over the next offseason, which is another good reason why it's not always a bad idea to just trade away your prospects when people want them, because this sometimes happens. And I saw it with Nate Pearson, for example, too, who they can't give away right now and was once worth a lot. So anyways, with the Jays, Pop and Bass, not fantasy factors at all. They deepen the bullpen. They're not great relievers. I think Jays fans would have found it way more exciting if the Jays traded for like a Raisel Iglesias type, but they didn't want to do that. They wanted to trade for guys who are cheap in the bullpen. Pop has a lot of years of control. The Jays love that. Even Bass has a $3 million contract for next year, which the way he's pitching this year sounds like a good idea. I think their plan, we saw this with the Simber Richards trade last year, it was to get relievers they could have for more than 1 year. So they start spring training with a bit of a base in the bullpen.
Yep.
Mitch White, I think for the Jays is just going to be a swingman the rest of the year. That's my guess. I think it was interesting. Like Ross Stripling's actually been really good for them in the rotation.
Yeah, he has.
I don't
He
know
just
if
doesn't go deep.
I know,
He's like a poor man's Sonny Gray.
Right. So it's like, but it's like, were they going to bump him? So they were linked to say Syndergaard. Like Syndergaard hasn't pitched better than Ross Stripling this year. Were they going to bump Stripling for Syndergaard? Does that actually make the team any better? It's like, quote, deeper. But instead, they grabbed a guy in White who can go in their bullpen, be a multi-inning reliever, or go to AAA and just keep starting, and then be available if when they need a starter down the stretch. They didn't, like you said, they couldn't get Mahle. I think the Yankees kind of beat them to the punch on Montas. The Merrifield trade, though, was really interesting. I believe that Merrifield, this one's interesting. The Jays have said they view him as an everyday player. George Springer has an elbow problem, has missed 3 of the last 4 games, and could end up, I think it's reasonable to say now, he could end up for at least a short IL stint. Well, he's on the IL. That would make Merrifield startable in fantasy. I'm interested to see. I think this is a value drop for Merrifield, which we don't usually see when a player goes from a bad team to a good team and a bad offense to a good offense. But I feel like in Toronto, I don't know, like unless they hit him leadoff sometimes, when Springer's out, they can hit him leadoff. When Springer's back, if he hits low in the lineup and he doesn't play every day, I don't know. I don't know if Merrifield's going to be usable, and definitely not in 10-team leagues and maybe not in 12s. I worry about that with him. He had so much value tied to him just hitting leadoff for the Royals, or at least high in the lineup and stealing bases. Right. Yep. So you're like, hey, he's not a great player, but he's going to get me 80 or 90 runs scored and steal 30 bases. Now I'm not so sure. When the Jays are healthy, he's not a better player than Espinal or Biggio, who have been playing second base. He's definitely not better than Springer, Gurriel, and Hernandez.
Yeah, I was just going to say, he's not what you would call good. He's better fantasy than anything else.
I do see why he fits for the Jays, like because they have this injury concern over Springer, and second base is arguably their weakest position when everybody's healthy. He can play second. He can play the outfield. Adding him, actually, they didn't pay a ton. Adding him makes sense.
Yeah, honestly, it's almost all about what sort of start he gets off to.
Yeah.
They gave up in this deal. They gave up Max Castillo, who's actually sneakily pretty good, I think.
Okay. Yep.
And then Samad Taylor, who I don't know a whole lot about. I think he's kind of just an extra guy in this deal, but you know what? His numbers are okay this year. If you number scouting a little bit, he's a 23-year-old in AAA, 763 OPS. The year before, 888 in AA. So yeah, I could see it a little bit. Max Castillo, on the other hand, he's actually in James Anderson's top 400 prospect list. Number like 220 or so. That's not bad.
Yeah,
that's not bad for a guy who's a 30-year-olds plus second baseman on the decline.
Yep.
I don't think that's a bad haul at all for that. But you know what? If Merrifield gets off to a hot start, it won't matter. I mean, all you need him to do is be good for a couple of months.
Yeah, he reminds me a little bit of when the Jays traded for Ben Revere a few years ago, when they had that Batista, Donaldson, and Encarnacion group. They traded for Ben Revere. He's a little more of an all speedster than Merrifield, but pretty similar.
Yeah,
like speedy guy. In the outfield, Merrifield probably primarily be in the outfield. Speedy guy, could hit leadoff, could hit ninth. I think that's kind of how they'll use him. But for fantasy purposes, I think this is a loss for him. He also has to get vaccinated. That's what's also interesting about the whole thing is he was the guy who, when the Royals came to town, was not vaccinated, but actually said in the media, if I was on a good team, I'd probably get vaccinated.
Right.
So here we go. He's probably getting vaccinated as of today. The Jays are on a road trip, so he can do the road trip with them. Maybe worst case scenario, if he got vaccinated today or tomorrow, that he'd miss a home series or something like that.
What I read was anybody that wasn't vaccinated to be eligible for the first game that they're back, they had to be vaccinated by Friday. Now
this past Friday, you mean?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So
maybe he misses the series.
Yeah, but one series, you can deal with that. But beyond that, not so much.
It's just fascinating that we've seen that as the teams come to Toronto, there aren't that many unvaccinated players. Like the Royals, there were
except for the Royals.
The other teams were all dropping like 2 guys and stuff like that. And the Jays actually did manage to trade for one of them. So, anyways, curing COVID one trade at a time, your Toronto Blue Jays. Anyways, it's kind of funny. but I'm worried as someone who has Merrifield in some leagues. I have him in our labor league.
Yes, you do.
I'm worried about how much play he'll get. And will they let him just run the bases like the Royals did? I always felt like the Royals just really didn't care. They're always losing. You know, he can steal bases. When he had Ned Yost, he loves steals. With the Jays, I don't know if I don't think he's getting the same green light. If he hits leadoff, say if Springer's out and he hits leadoff, I don't think he's stealing bases in front of Vlad and Bichette and everything like as much as he was stealing them in Kansas City. And if he's hitting lower in the lineup, he's not getting as many opportunities.
Right. That's a good point.
I think he's one of the few guys who got traded today where I think usually when guys get traded to good teams, it's a win for them. He's one of the guys who I think it's a loss.
I can see that. By the way, I think Mitch White's actually in AAA for now, but ultimately he's going to be in the rotation, I think. Or they'll go 6-man. I mean, Manoah's probably going to make that start, so we'll see what the Blue Jays do. Before we move on to the Yankees, time to insert a quick note from our good friends on the Blue Wire Podcast Network. And we are back. Thank you for your indulgence as far as that goes. So the Yankees threw everybody for a curveball with a late trade. Jordan Montgomery traded out of their starting rotation to the St. Louis Cardinals for a hurt outfielder in Harrison Bader, who's dealing with plantar fasciitis. Did not see this one coming, Fred. I always thought it was going to be like, and I know some people are the talking heads were all, and me, we're all thinking it was going to be like leading up to clearing the decks so they get another significant pitcher like Pablo Lopez, but that never happened.
I know this Montgomery deal I find curious. Like the Frankie Montas deal makes perfect sense. The Yankees gave up some prospects. The A's got a good return for Montas. The Yankees get a good starter to put in that rotation. But now by trading Montgomery, I would say their rotation, I'd say that's just a wash or pretty much a wash. Like Montgomery had done really well this year. Montas might be better than Montgomery.
It was really weird. Like from a fantasy perspective, Jordan Montgomery was super unlucky and like super bad timing whenever he had like a bad spot in a game. His overall numbers, 369, 110 are pretty good, but it always seemed like it came at the wrong time. Like for instance, in his last start against the Royals, where he was cruising for 3 innings and then 4 innings, then couldn't get out of the 5th. And that would seem like typical of the Jordan Montgomery experience. Only 3-3. He's made 21 starts this year. It's not like he's been hurt or anything.
No.
Jordan Montgomery to the NL Central. I like that. If you're in an NL only league, I think there's going to be lots of guys to go after, but he's one of them. I'd make a pretty good point going after.
Yeah, and maybe something lately has turned the Yankees off on him. And he has been worse lately. Like his last 2 starts have been really bad. Even before then, he had some decent ones. He had a little bit of a bad run around the end of June. That's been his worst stretches of the year. Like his ERA late June was under 3. So he's been a little worse lately. Maybe the Yankees have soured on him a bit. Maybe they think they can get more length out of Montas. I think Montas is more valuable to them than Montgomery, but not way more valuable. And then they add Bader, who, I don't know. Last year's Bader was better than this year's Bader. He's stealing a lot of bases, which we care about a lot for in fantasy, but in real life doesn't move the needle. His OPS. So I looked at him initially and I was like, oh, he'll take over in center field. And then I looked and I was like, oh, I think Aaron Hicks has a slightly higher OPS than Bader this year. So,
but this isn't an offensive acquisition. This is a defensive acquisition.
So they get him in center field now. Hicks kind of moves around a little bit more. Yep, they have better defense. I don't know. I just find the whole thing. The Yankees didn't get as much better at the deadline as I thought they were going to. When they first got Montas, I was like, okay, here we go. This is probably the start of a lot. And now with this one, I don't know. They didn't get that much better at the deadline. Their rotation got a little better. They got a better.
Oh, Montas is huge, though.
So how much better is Montas than Montgomery?
Significantly.
I think so, eh? So because
significantly better. Ability to go deeper into a game. Keep in mind the bulk
for sure.
I think it's a big difference. I think that he's going to be someone. I think Louis. I think had he not had the shoulder thing a couple of weeks, like a month ago, he would have been on the same level as Luis Castillo in terms of what he would have returned in the trade market. I think he's a significantly bigger improvement over who they had over Montgomery or anybody else that they replacing the rotation. I think he slots right in. Probably, let's see, looking at the Yankees rotation right now. I mean, obviously Cole's number 1, Nestor Cortez 2, Montas 3. I think I start him over Tyon. I start him. I mean, Domingo Germán. the thing that it's surprising to me is Severino just went on the 60-day IL. They kind of left themselves a little naked right now. That they need Herman all of a sudden. That's the thing that surprised me about the Montgomery trade.
Yeah, I like I said, I don't love it. I thought they needed the pitching depth. I'm a little surprised by it. I think your points on Montas are fair. I think it just depends on how good you think Montgomery is. Like I said, like his last 2 starts have been poor, which has pushed his ERA way up. It was in the low 3s just like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
I
Montas
don't know.
part is key. I mean, I don't think you need to do the Montgomery trade necessarily, but Montgomery is not a playoff pitcher. And that's the way I'm looking
He might have
at it.
been their
The Yankees
third.
are going to be in the playoffs. Obviously, they're going to win their division. Obviously.
And they're not playing in the 3-game series either. So
Yeah.
they're thinking straight ahead to a full series.
And you need a 7-game series. You need length out of your starters. You need to at least get into that 6th inning, get at least 2 times through the order, if not 3. I know they added to their bullpen. They added, Efros, Trevino, whatever. I'm not convinced that was great, but we'll see. But the big thing is that, Chapman's been better lately, so that helps. But they needed, I think they needed that stud, a guy that that can take the ball in the playoffs and be confident he's going to pitch well. And I don't think Montgomery's it. Tyon might be. Tyon's losing 4-0 today, though, so we'll see about that. I don't know. I just think that was all of the playoffs in mind. Luis Castillo would have been the dog for them, though. I mean, I think he would have been the perfect fit. I think it's a perfect fit for everybody.
Yeah.
That was the guy, and I think the Yankees were in on Castillo. They didn't match Seattle's price, or Seattle topped their price, or whatever the case may be. Bader, I think he helps their defense. Maybe it might even be they mix and match Judge and Bader a little bit. Though not Judge, Hicks and Bader. God, matching Judge, that'd be funny. And they added Benintendi last week too, and that gives them some OBP and some defense in the corner, a little bit there. They're going to have a lot of optionality, and that's one thing the Yankees will do. From the Cardinals' standpoint, Montgomery is a better pitcher than what they had, and I think better than Payante. But this is a pitch to contact team. They still don't have a playoff ace. They added Jose Quintana and they added Jordan Montgomery. Okay, it's as I was tweeting back and forth with Cardinals fans, it's such a current iteration of the Cardinals move. In fact, I think I called Quintana with Nicholas Gott earlier, and he's with Pitcher List, and we were talking about him. He's a big Cardinals guy, and they're supposedly in on Montas. They were definitely in on Soto. They did not do they did not get their big trade though. They got little trades.
Yeah. No, they traded as though their plan is to kind of grind their way to the playoffs, right? Like you said, Montgomery's not awesome, but he's a 5 and a bit innings pitcher who can have a mid-3s ERA. They grabbed Quintana, who in that division so far this year had a mid-3s ERA. Like their goal, I think, like you said, they don't have this high-end ace. They don't look scary in a playoff series, but they do look like a team that's out to kind of grind their way into the playoffs. I'm a little surprised they thought that they didn't need Bader, that they feel comfortable with the outfield group they have, which right now is Dylan Carlson, Tyler O'Neill, and Lars Nootbaar.
I mean, they left themselves, again, unless
on the bench. Gross.
Yeah.
That's not good.
No, well, yeah, they seem like they'd be an obvious team to add an outfielder. Sometimes Edman plays the outfield, I guess. Especially now that DeYoung is back up. That maybe they put Edman back in the outfield a little bit. But Nootbaar, who actually has been pretty good lately, but they refuse to try. I don't know. He has. I don't think so. Actually, he's not been that good. Or maybe he just started so badly that his overall stats still make it look like it's not good. Yes, 690 OPS. I thought it was interesting. They refused to include Dylan Carlson in any deal involving Soto.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah,
I like Dylan Carlson. I was all over him this year. They like him more. O'Neill's banged up, and he hasn't had this consistent level of performance.
Yeah,
it's a very interesting roster build.
I was going to say maybe the Cubs wouldn't trade with them, but Ian Happ I think would have made a lot of sense for the Cardinals. Again, that's another grind your way to the playoffs type guy, but at least it would replace Bader with someone who's been a better offensive player than Bader this year. Maybe isn't quite the outfielder Bader is, but I like something like that. and then they've added Montgomery. I don't know. This, yeah, like you said, this is very Cardinals. I think they can potentially grind their way into a playoff spot just by having one guy after another go out and post a decent start, and the bullpen be solid and the hitting be just good enough. But then they look like a team that you'd love to play in the first round.
Or at least the second round. Maybe they even win that 3-6 or 4-5 series, but then they run into the Dodgers, Padres, or Mets or Braves,
and are way overmatched.
Yeah, I just can't see them winning 2 7-game series back to back in those next 2 rounds.
Yeah.
So that's where I think the story ends. Maybe it could be owner driven again. For all we know, Bill DeWitt might be there saying, "Hey, I got you, Arenado. I'm not going to spend another, this. That's just not what I'm going to do." So I get it. But if you're a St. Louis fan, I understand your disappointment there, because that is a little bit, a little disappointing. I want to talk for my Reds for a second here. We talked about Mahle, we talked about Castillo and what they did for their new teams. But I thought the Reds did pretty well. I didn't like that they put themselves in the position to be sellers in the first point. And this dates back 1.5 years ago, and that's covered ground, so I won't belabor the point.
Yep.
But, man, they loaded up for bear. I mean, I think they got better value in their deals than anyone besides the Soto trade. I thought that, both the Castillo and Mahle deals were really good prospect returns. So looking at, I use James Anderson's rankings as a proxy, and, that's a pretty good starting point there. I'm pretty happy with what they got.
Yeah, I think so too. I think they did, like you said, they made the best of a bad situation. They were in a bad situation, and they moved their guys. Like, they moved Brandon Drury, right? Mm-hmm. Like they aren't holding anyone right now where teams are looking around, where fans are looking around being like, why didn't you trade that guy? Just get whatever you can for him. Like, they moved Castillo, they moved Mahle, they moved Drury. Their team in a 2022 sense is so much worse than it was a few days ago. But like you said, the prospect cupboard is now much, much more full, and now Reds fans have something they can start looking towards in the future.
Yeah,
I did want to ask you about Drury, and is he going to still be fantasy playable? I think this is not a bad landing spot for him with the.
It's gonna be a great lineup.
It's a great lineup. He'll probably hit in the lower half of it, but even the lower half of that lineup's not bad. I don't know, when Tatis comes back, I think if Drury goes into San Diego and hits like he's been hitting, at least hits somewhat like he's been hitting, I think there's room for them to play him.
I agree. He won't play third, obviously. He'll play some second, although Cronenworth is such a better defensive player. But he could play a corner outfield spot or DH, and I think those spots, that's fine. I think that's what he's, obviously, he's not going to play right field, but could play left field. Profar will play here and there. I mean, the thing is, they have all this ability to mix and match now. But Drury, all the StatCast data supports what he's been doing.
Yep.
It's not just like a lot of lucky homers in Great American Small Park. It helps that he was playing there, but he's been hitting rockets all year.
And if he's at an 855 OPS, if he keeps hitting like that, you find a way to put him in your lineup, even if you just DH him every day. Like,
if he has a 795 OPS, you still play him.
Absolutely, you don't sit like those guys. So
so he's definitely fantasy rosterable still. I think he plays often enough that this doesn't kill him. It hurts him a little bit ballpark wise, homer wise. It hurts him maybe one game a week where he sits, maybe. Maybe 2. I don't know, but I still think he's still a guy you hold on to for sure. And I like what coming back in the Drury trade, they got Acosta, another shortstop. They've gotten a bunch of shortstops. That's okay. It's okay to have an extra talent at the most important position, not being a pitcher. That is, it's the most important defensive position. Anybody that can play shortstop can play anywhere else but catcher. You can put them anywhere. They're great athletes. They're the best athletes on the field. The Reds, one of the things I liked is they took the best available players, period. You can move guys to different positions.
The rest out later. Yeah.
You can turn them around in trades later on. It's fine. That part is really good. I am not happy that they had to trade, but again, just looking at what they got, I think they did well. We got some complaints about the Mets. 2 of them here. So I'll go back to that, scroll back for that a little bit there, because, I think there are a lot of unhappy Mets fans right now. And I get it. you want you want the Mets to be involved in Soto, but honestly, I don't think it was realistic that they would get Soto for a couple of reasons. And they did their big swing for the fences in the offseason. They got Scherzer, they got Marte, they got Kana or Kanya. The fact is they've invested in their product. Cohen has been putting money into this team. I don't think they could have gotten they could have gotten Wilson Contreras. I think that would have made sense for them because he's better than James McCann. But I have no problem with them. I don't put them among the losers here. I think this is still a very strong team.
Yeah, I agree. I do think Contreras is pardon the pun, the swing and miss from them. Like that one would have made perfect sense. The fact that Cubs didn't deal him makes me feel like maybe the Cubs are just dumb, but it makes me feel like they didn't get any offers they even liked a little bit. So I feel like maybe they could have got him. Like it wasn't like they were competing with a lot of other teams. They made one that's kind of interesting. It's kind of Rays like. Darren Ruff is a right-handed bat that's really good against lefties. They recently added Daniel Vogelback, who's a left-handed bat who's good against righties. There is a scenario over there where they can kind of platoon them, and probably between the two of them can get an 8-something OPS, out of one lineup spot. So that's kind of an interesting one.
And Tyler Naquin before that too is another part that they can use.
He's not from his time in Cincinnati. Like Tyler Naquin's not nothing. He's not a great player, but again, he's a major leaguer. He's not having his best season this year, but we're talking about someone who's had some decent seasons. Like last year, he had 809 OPS. Like he was decent last year, right? 70 runs driven in and then 411 at bats. Like he was decent last year. So I think he's someone to help them. They just didn't have that eye-popping. Michael Givens in the bullpen is kind of just a guy. He's useful for sure.
As Anthony suggests, they didn't add a lefty. Yes, I get that. I'll tell you though, some of the
adding
best
a lefty
bullpens
would have made a lot of sense. Yeah,
some of the best bullpens I've seen don't have any lefties in it.
Yeah,
I've seen that before. So yeah, that would have made some sense. But what was available? Andrew Chafin was suggested. But who knows what the Tigers' asking price was? The Tigers made one trade, Michael Fulmer, and that's it. Gregory Soto, they could have gone for him too while they're at it there, away from the Tigers. But the Tigers might have been asking for the moon and thinking that they'd get it, and they didn't. I actually thought there'd be more reliever trades than we saw even.
Yes, way more. That's one of my most surprising things today. Is just I thought there would be more Michael Givens trades. These little trades where just a veteran reliever who's useful but not awesome gets traded for a low-level prospect, because why would the Cubs keep Michael Givens for the rest of the year? I thought there'd be way more trades. Yeah. I'm not up on Andrew Chafin's contract situation. Maybe he's still under contract next year, and maybe the Tigers are thinking that they can. The Tigers thought this year they were going to be the Guardians. Yeah. Right. Like the Guardians are that 500-ish team hanging around in a weak division that the Tigers thought they were going to be. And they aren't. But maybe they think that they can reload, and that maybe next year Torkelson starts hitting all of a sudden, Riley Green takes off, and the pitching guys like Mize and Manning figure it out, and maybe guys like Chafin are under contract next year and they want to keep them.
He is under contract next year. He signed a 2-year, $13 million deal in March.
Yeah.
Does include an opt-out clause for next year though. Clause for next year.
I would stay in that deal if I was him.
Yeah, probably so. Yeah. And the thing is, and so it is a little interesting to see how that happened. But Chafin, he has a 2.53 ERA, a 106 WHIP. I mean, he's been solid. Only one homer allowed all year. That would have been a good one to add. So yeah, good suggestion. The Astros, they did add a lefty, but they did it in an unconventional way. They traded away one of the guys in their starting rotation, and Jake Odorizzi, to the Braves. It was like a kind of win-win, because the Braves actually are blessed with lefty bullpen depth. They trade. It's not often you see a contending team trade away two guys of their bullpen. They traded away Jesse Chavez and they traded away Will Smith. Now, they added Iglesias and they added another starter. Obviously, this is with Ian Anderson in mind. They had to get, Ian Anderson's as good as gone from the rotation now. But the Braves still have three other lefties in their bullpen: AJ Minter, Tyler Matzik, and Dealine Lee, all who are pretty good. So they're just blessed with lefties. And maybe Anderson finds himself in the bullpen, and gets it back, or maybe they send him down to AAA. I don't know which route they'll take on that.
That's an interesting one. So, okay, first of all, and I saw this comment in our chat about half an hour ago, kudos to Alex Anthopoulos. I'm a huge Alex Anthopoulos fan.
Yep.
another great deadline for him. Getting Robbie Grossman, who hits lefties really well and can platoon with Eddie Rosario, super smart. I think the Odorizzi for Will Smith trade for the Braves, like you said, makes a ton of sense. The Braves can cover the loss of Will Smith. Deepening that starting group is going to pay off for them. That makes a lot of sense. Obviously, the Iglesias trade is a huge one, but it also sets them up to not have to get a closer on the free agent market. Ian Anderson is really interesting. So your comment was he's good as gone from the rotation. And I'm not like 100% sure on that. Like his last start was so good. 6 innings, no runs, 1 hit, 9 strikeouts.
You know what? You're right.
And
I
then,
hadn't noticed that.
So
I
the
think
start
it was
before
Saturday.
that, right. So the start before that was the one against the Angels that you and I talked about because I streamed him in Friends and Family and he was awful. But the 3 starts before that were all 5 or 5 1/3, but only 1 or 2 runs allowed. Not amazing starts, but certainly like hold on to your rotation spot type starts. Now, I won't say he's been good this year because he hasn't. His ERA is basically 5. His whip's
150 whip, Fred. 150,
crazy,
49 walks and 101 innings.
Yep, the walk rate is not getting any better. He's continuing to walk batters, but he was better last start. I feel like he will get another start. I feel like they'll probably kind of go start to start with him the rest of the way. Spencer Strider's the other one that he came from the bullpen. He was an amazing weapon in the bullpen for them. He could go back to the bullpen at some point.
Or they'll go 6-man rotation.
Or they can go 6-man rotation to kind of, and I think that's their solution because it paces out Strider. It paces out Kyle Wright.
Paces out Strider, huh?
That's
like
right.
That. There's a pun. You didn't even try to do it.
Didn't even try to do it. It just comes naturally.
Those are the best ones.
It paces out Kyle Wright. It limits the damage Ian Anderson can do, right? Like he's only starting 1 in every 6 games. Charlie Morton's an older guy. He might not be hurt by pitching every 6 games instead of every 5th game down the stretch. Jake Odorizzi's hardly an ace. Like they're not a top heavy rotation. I think Strider's really good, but like again, pacing him out makes a lot of sense. I think 6-man makes a lot of sense for them. And as we know, 6-man rotations have a way of just working themselves out. Like in a month, one of these guys, 3 weeks, whatever, one of these guys will be hurt and they'll be back to a 5. But a 6 for now, unless Ian Anderson comes out this week and just gets blown up again and they want to give him some AAA starts, I think a 6-man makes sense for now, which hurts everybody's fantasy value a little bit. But I don't know. If you have guys like Strider, you probably knew some sort of innings issue was coming.
Probably so.
Yeah, you're just happy if you were the guy who got him off waivers.
Let's talk about one of Atlanta's trade partners, the Houston Astros. Rare to see 2 contending teams trade with each other, but it happened. Need for need. The Astros didn't have any lefties in their bullpen, so Will Smith is a perfect fit. They had a good bullpen, really good bullpen. Presley, Montero, Neris, Stanek, and Matone are all pretty good. Brian Abreu was actually pretty solid, but Blake Taylor's in the 60-day IL. They didn't really have a lefty of note in their bullpen. They had a 6-man rotation with Odorizzi with Lance McCullers ramping up. I think it shows McCullers going to go in the rotation. He's not going to go in the bullpen like we thought might happen. They kind of addressed that issue a little bit. I think that made sense. They did targeted acquisitions. They went out and they got the lefty reliever. They got a catcher improvement in Christian Vasquez. We'll see how they meet out the playing time between he and Martin Maldonado, because everything I've read suggests Machete, which is what they call Maldonado, is really good at handling pitchers, calling a good game, et cetera, et cetera. But, man, he's woeful at the plate.
He sure is. He can't even get a 600 OPS the last couple of years. So, yeah, he's as bad as an offensive player as you'll see for someone who gets that amount of playing time. He does hit the occasional homer, so he does do something. But, yeah, he's awful. I thought the Astros deadline. Oh, I'm not sure. Did you mention Trey Mancini?
No, I was getting there next.
Roster. So that's a huge one. He's someone who could be helped by hitting in that lineup and getting out of Baltimore, maybe with the way their park's been playing this year. I think the Astros had a great deadline.
Yeah, I think the one thing they didn't address was center field. But Mancini plays a corner. Yeah, maybe every once in a while, Jordan Alvarez still plays the outfield, but they said they wanted Alvarez to play be the DH more often than not. That does take away an avenue of playing time for Vasquez, though. Every once in a while you think Vasquez might be a DH or something like that. And they added Mancini, who's either going to be first or outfield. So either Yuli Gurriel might also be a guy that loses some playing time.
Yeah, I kind of see it shaking down as, Gurriel probably and Mancini are like the DH first base combo. Alvarez will probably end up, I guess Alvarez has to end up back at DH. good amount. You're right. Gurriel could lose some playing time depending on how much Alvarez plays in the outfield, especially once Michael Brantley's back. Once Michael Brantley's back, Alvarez has to slide to DH. I think Chas McCormick's hit okay lately. Like, I guess they've decided him and Myers are good enough in the outfield. I think Vasquez, I think this is a fantasy loss for Vasquez in the sense that I just don't think he'll play as much. He might play more than Maldonado, but one of the things that made Vasquez appealing as a member of the Red Sox is they played him a lot. He would be one, not like JT Realmuto a lot, but he would be, or Sal Perez a lot, but he would be one of the leaders in the league in plate appearances by catchers. So I don't think he's going to do that the rest of the way. So I think this is a loss for him. But overall, I just think the Astros did some smart things. They're deeper at catcher now. They have the ability to pull Maldonado when they need to late in the game. They can pinch hit for him with Vasquez and then leave Vasquez in for the rest of the game. And maybe he's not quite the defensive catcher Maldonado is, but if they need it in a big spot, that's a way to do it. They don't even have to burn two bench spots by, pinch hitting with someone else. They can pinch hit with Vasquez. So, and the bullpen maneuver to me was just perfect. Like, they're so heavy right-handed. They've got good pitchers. Now they've got a lefty with Will Smith. They didn't have room for Odorizzi in the rotation once McCullers comes back. Yeah, they can still go 6-man, like you said, with McCullers. That kind of paces out some guys like Verlander and Javier the rest of the way. I think they're in a really good spot. I like their deadline more than the Yankees, for example. Much more.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I hate saying such good things about the Astros, but after everything that happened a couple of years ago, but I do find that they're a smart organization.
I think they are. James Click is a pretty smart GM. Another X-Ray with a bigger budget now, and good for Dusty Baker. I want him to win one, actually.
Me too. Yeah.
So I think they did well. How about their trade partner, the Boston Red Sox? I don't understand what the heck they're doing.
I think they're not going for it. I think they're almost
clearly they're not. They trade away their starting catcher.
Yeah, they're like a big budget Cleveland. They're just going to see what happens. You got keep the same guys going out and just see what happens. Like you said, they must have liked the return from Houston to get Vasquez. Like, they must have been like, okay, that's a prospect we want. Yep, we'll make that deal, and we'll get worse at catcher. They picked up Reese McGuire for very little. They'll use Plawecki more. Adding Tommy Pham is like something, although he's a guy who's maybe a little more of a fantasy asset than a real life asset. He hasn't hit well lately. Like, it's fine. It's fine. It's not going to move the needle. It's not going to put Boston in the playoffs.
I guess they don't. Jaron Duran had a big homer yesterday. Yesterday. Yeah. And it's a highly thought of prospect, but maybe they don't love him. I don't know. I mean, that's all I can think of there, but.
I thought the Pham one was really weird. When they got rid of Vasquez, I was like, okay, they're going to be at least a little bit in sell mode. Maybe they'll still try, but they'll be a little in sell mode. But to me, the Pham just doesn't make sense. I thought then at that point, maybe just use Franchi Cordero a lot the rest of the year and maybe finally see what you have in him. They didn't trade Eovaldi, so they didn't go full sell. That would have been the full sell mode, right? Would have been if they traded
JD Martinez, who's going to be a free agent. Xander Bogaerts, who could opt out after this year. Maybe he won't opt out, but they need to have that conversation with Xander there to see what they're going to do. I mean, maybe they all along weren't or kind of counting on that because they signed Story and want to move him back to shortstop eventually. I don't know. The Red Sox are loaded in the farm system. They do have one of the better farm systems out there. And the Valdez, the third baseman they got in the Vasquez trade, he's a number 111 on James Anderson's list. So that's not to be sneezed at. They got Bello that's up in the rotation right now, or has been at least. They got Casas. We keep on waiting for. Doing the Hosmer deal that was weird, but I guess they had to have liked the return they were getting from one of the minor leagues they got from the Padres. So they traded away one minor leaguer of their own in that deal.
Yeah, and they that's just them. Yeah, they like you said, they wanted the prospect. We don't see that trade in baseball all that often. We see it often. I see it way more in hockey, where teams take on a guy that nobody wants because they can get a prospect or a draft pick out of it. So, I think they took it on to get a prospect they like. So, I think the future's still bright. I think maybe Boston decided this. The future's still bright in Boston. Like you said, they have good prospects and they have money. They have good prospects and they have money. They can go and sign free agents this winter and bring up prospects, and like they can do those things. The future's bright. This year's Boston team, I don't think it really feels, especially with Chris Sale now back out, I don't think it feels at all like a contender to anyone. Like if they got in the playoffs, like look at that rotation.
Right. It's awful.
Like, yeah, Eovaldi is sometimes good. Pavetta's been good in stretches this year. The rest of it's not good at all. The bullpen's not good. It's got some pieces, Whitlock and Houck, but
yeah,
I think, like I said, the whole thing only thing I find weird is getting Pham. I just don't get.
I think the Hosmer trade's weird. I'm looking at those prospects too, and I'm nonplussed. Now, maybe I'm reading that wrong, and I'm not. Again, I'm number scouting. I'm reputation scouting. I'm not a scout.
How much are they paying Hosmer though? I didn't in all the Fleury deals. If they're not paying him any money,
they're getting some cash considerations, but I think.
They must
Hosmer.
Like San Diego must be paying most of that contract.
Yeah, I guess.
That was my thinking. If they're hardly paying him anything, then they can cut him if they have to. If they,
and here's the thing. Yeah, it must be, but it's Hosmer's got an opt-out clause. I don't think the team does. And Hosmer, it would be the dumbest decision in the world to opt out of this contract.
Yeah.
I don't think he's that deluded in his own ability. So
yeah, I just assume that when we get the full financials on that the Padres are paying most of it. The Red Sox are paying very little. And it's just like found money. If he hits in Boston, great. If he doesn't hit, they just cut him next season. And
I guess.
And then who cares? They picked up some low-level prospect for nothing. I'm going to guess, too, that San Diego was so intent on getting Soto that there was no chance they were letting Eric Hosmer hold up that deal. So,
by the way, they quickly reformed it so quickly and included Voit instead.
When he wouldn't go to the Nats, they were just like, sure, Voit. And then they talked to Boston and they were like, look, we'll pay for him. Will you just take him? Use him sometimes at first base. We don't really care. Just take him. We'll pay for him. You just get him off our roster.
I guess you can spend your way out of luxury tax consideration. Is that, that I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know how this works.
Yeah. But I do think, like I said, I do think the future is bright in Boston because they have money and they have prospects. So they can bring up prospects. And then when those prospects are good, they can spend money on free agents. Yeah. And this is one of the worst Boston teams we've seen. That's maybe a little harsh. This is not one of the better Boston teams we've seen in the last decade. So, and it doesn't feel like a team that could win a playoff series against whatever, Toronto, Tampa. Like I think they look worse than Minnesota by far. And we said Minnesota we didn't think could win a playoff series. Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah,
that's true. I think that, I think Minnesota might be able to, but yeah, it would depend on the matchups a little bit, obviously, too.
Charlie Brown in the football. You're just going to believe in Minnesota could still win, eh?
Well, they're not going to be paired against the Yankees in the first round, so they got that going for them.
No, they're going to get the last wild card team. Like they're going to get probably one of Toronto, Tampa, or Seattle. I guess it's possible. I'll go back on that. I think they could with home field for all 3 games. I think it's possible.
I think they would. Yeah, if they got a home field series against the Rays or the Mariners. Yeah, I could see that.
That's fine. And then
although the Mariners are reformed too. We'll see. They got Castillo now, and Castillo, Robbie Ray, Logan Gilbert's a pretty good 1-2-3.
I would pick Minnesota to lose that series, but I give them a chance.
Yeah.
I do not give them a chance in the next round going to Houston.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah,
I'd absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
All right, that is going to wrap it up. Is there anybody else that we missed?
Not much. Do you think there's any chance the Dodgers can fix Joey Gallo?
Sure. It cost them nothing.
Yeah. But they probably can't fix him fast enough to matter for fantasy this year.
Yeah. Oh, Philly.
Brandon
That's the one thing we didn't touch. Brandon Marsh, Noah Syndergaard, David Robertson. If you're a Phillies fan, are you happy with your haul?
Yeah, I think so. Especially because the Phillies are not the Yankees. They're not the Dodgers. Like they're not at the top of the league right now. Like they're a team battling for a wild card spot. So they could have easily gone the Guardians Red Sox route, especially with Harper hurt, and said, nah, it's just not us this year. But they're getting Gene Segura back. They're hopeful to get Harper back at some point. They seem excited about Brandon Marsh. I'm not at all. Like, I don't think he's a very good player.
Well, he's a center fielder, and I think that can't be discounted because they've had such subpar quality defense in the outfield this year. He can go pick it.
Yep, for sure. I was actually just at a Angels game, as you know, recently, and I watched him pick a few. Now, it wasn't in center field; it was in left field, but I still watched him pick it a few times. Yep. His OPS this year, just for the record, is lower than Odubel Herrera, who they released.
I understand that now.
But you're right. The defensive value for sure.
I think there's a team malaise going on with the Angels too. I really do.
Yeah.
I think he's better than that.
It wasn't better last year as a rookie, or not much better. 673 last year, rookie year. I don't know. I'm just not that sold on him as an offensive player, but I do agree he could help them just with his defense the rest of the year. I think Robertson helps them a ton because that bullpen's not great. And Syndergaard helps them, even though I don't know in fantasy terms if this is I don't think this is an upgrade for Syndergaard.
No, except for the run support. Run support will be better.
Yeah, it'll be better.
Ballpark will be worse.
Division's probably about a wash. Like I know the Nats and Marlins are appealing, but the Braves and Mets aren't. And the AL West is probably about the same overall as far as the 4 lineup. Actually,
you got A's and Rangers. All the Rangers at least are trying.
The A's are real easy. You're right. But maybe so. No one in the AL. Houston. Actually, I'd say no one in the AL West is as scary as the Braves.
No,
they haven't been as productive as the Braves this year. So
yeah, but Houston is, and Seattle is.
They're not as far as like runs scored or OPS as a team this year. Like the Braves are above them. So
they are weirdly, but I nonetheless I almost always want to avoid Houston. They don't strike out. They're a long lineup and they just got lengthier. So I don't know.
Yeah, no. They're I agree. Like they're a good lineup for sure. Anyways, I just think Park is a negative. Like the Park switch is a negative one for Syndergaard. I don't know. He's another one of the guys who got traded today, and I'm not really that excited about.
Yep.
I'm not any more excited about him. There's no now that the NL has the DH, he doesn't get that bump. But
I actually have one more question for you, by the way, before we sign off.
And I will admit the Astros are better than I thought. I thought they were further behind the Braves. They're actually only one spot behind the Braves in OPS. So I'll say they're a wash. Actually, I thought they were further away. Anyways, go ahead.
AL Tout Wars.
Yes. We got to talk about this for a minute.
I'm sitting second in FAAB remaining. Castillo went off the boards last week.
This is good.
No, it's not. Tyler Mahle is a clear number 1.
Oh, no. Is there nothing else?
Okay,
I just assumed.
Yeah, well, it's Tommy Pham.
No.
Well, wait, there's more. Harrison Bader.
I take him over Tommy Pham, I think. Oh, I might not, actually. You're right, I might not. Oh, it's so bad.
It's really bad.
So how do we have this many?
If Jesse Chavez saves games for the Angels, he's there.
It's so bad. We had so many trades, but you're right. Like they're not
that many cross-league trades.
Not that, and the ones that were, no, they're not good.
I'm looking at Tommy Pham. And it's kind of a little like
that is terrible.
Crossing my fingers, hoping he plays.
That is, I would take him over Bader just because he's healthy. That is so disappointing. You're right. The Montas in the league, the whole Soto trade, the Hader trade, like the Iglesias trade kills Iglesias' value. It's not even that great for NL people. The Merrifield one in the league, the Mancini one, the Lopez, the Robertson.
Vasquez.
That is unbelievable.
Wilson Contreras not going to the Astros is what killed me. Obviously, Soto going over would have been huge.
This was such a busy deadline, and just everything was almost everything was within the leagues.
Yep.
I would have never guessed. I just thought with the volume of trades that for sure there would have been something more appealing than Tommy Pham for you before we broke it all down right now.
Yeah, I don't think there is. I really don't think there's
not. You're right. Like you said, unless the Angels settle on a closer this
week. Is why when you said Thor, I was thinking that you might have been in an NL league and how you weren't enthused about him. And the NL is not much better. I'm only in one NL only league, and in fact, it might be worse. But
it's maybe it's Thor, it's Iglesias.
Yeah,
Iglesias is helpful in an NL league for sure.
I mean, at least in the AL, you got Castillo and Mahle, but I mean that's pretty thin. And David Peralta went last week. I tweeted about this. Like, if you're sitting with the number 2 hammer in the AL last weekend, do you use it on Peralta or do you wait to see what else comes over?
You wait. I would take Pham over and Bader over Peralta.
Would you?
Yeah, just because they can steal bases and he can't. Assuming IQ steals.
And he's not going to play. Well, Peralta went and Rob Leibowitz spent, he spent enough that moved me from 3 to 2 in terms of on the pecking.
So I would have waited if I was Rob, although it wouldn't have worked out for him. Well, he wouldn't have got much.
No.
If he got better, he wouldn't have got much better.
No.
That is fascinating. I thought for sure.
It's depressing.
It's depressing for you. It's fascinating for me. I thought for sure even like a Brandon Drury, like even just like I would have way rather him if he got situation. Yeah. I thought at least at second you would get someone like him.
Yeah. And then the Blue Jays got Mitch White, who might not even start.
Yeah, you can't bid on him.
I can bid on him, but I'm not going to spend.
But you can't bid your
because you just remember how thin the onlys are.
Yeah.
But it's really disappointing.
Yeah.
It's not a whole lot out there.
Yeah. I can't believe it. That's fascinating. Yeah. And I hadn't put the whole thing together because I'm just thinking more mixed leagues. I hadn't put the whole thing together until
for a while. It was Luke Weaver and Will Smith were number 2 and number 3 behind FAAB, but now it's Mahle FAAB. I think I'm going to end up with Tommy Pham. I prefer Mahle, but
yeah.
Is there any chance I highly suspect Joe's going to
need a starter?
What's that?
Is there any chance the person with the hammer just doesn't need a starter?
So it's Joe Sheehan. So let's go take a look at his roster real quick. I'm not sure this is fascinating hearing me talk through this, but
if you've made it this far in the podcast, you probably really, really like fantasy baseball, and you'll hear this out.
Yeah, we might be abusing that privilege. Joe needs everything, I think.
Okay.
He's got Jarrell Cotton as active on his roster.
And you can't trade for FAAB, right? You would have had to trade for it last.
No, I can trade FAAB. You can trade FAAB, but I can't do it for this period. It's too late.
That's what I mean. No, that's what I meant. You would have had to trade for it before Sunday to get ahead of Joe.
Yep. And looking at Joe's roster answered my question whether Felix Bautista is available. No, he's not. And he's got Joe Kelly active on his roster. Yeah,
would Tyler Mahle have been the perfect also positional fit for you more so than a hitter?
100,000%.
Okay, so why don't you go to Joe and offer him like a trade? I will give you player X if you give me FAAB so that I can leapfrog.
Oh, I can't. You can't trade FAAB. You'd have to get the player and then trade him. I can't. Well, not in time for the bidding.
Traded FAAB can't be used.
I don't think so.
You're right. Okay, so you would have to go to Joe and be like, "I'll give you player X if you take someone other than Tyler Mahle."
Yeah.
And so that I can get him with my second.
Or
you just trade me Tyler Mahle. You take Mahle, I'll take whoever you want. So you want FAAB, I'll take FAAB, and then I'll give you FAAB and player X for Mahle's.
That would be the formation of it for sure. Because I'm sitting with 5 points in wins, so that's my worst category.
Right. Well, it's Tuesday. You've got till Sunday. You could try to make that deal with Joe.
Yep. Hopefully Joe's listening and he can even initiate, but we'll see. Probably if he were listening, probably weren't listening this deep. So
probably
it's
not.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts before we part?
I am fully out of thoughts. I am ready
too.
to go watch the end of my Blue Jays game and bang out the rest of this trade deadline article.
Sounds good. All right. Okay. Thanks everybody for listening to us and sitting through this whole time. Appreciate all the comments in the forum. It really is great. Especially on a day like today. It was a fun day. Good luck. Hopefully the trade deadline treats you well, and that your teams all win. Thanks for listening. Take care.